Welcome to a brand new edition of Pathbreakers with me, Neha Bothra. My guest today is someone who set up one of the most successful private equity firms in India in 1999. For over 2 decades, he was one of the most successful investment managers in the country. But at the young age of 43, he decided to do something quite unusual. He decided to give up his full-time career and turn philanthropist. This is Ashish Dhawan's story as he tries to reimagine India's education sector. Stay tuned. Ashish, thank you so much for joining us on Pathbreakers and having us in your beautiful campus. How did you hit upon the idea of Ashoka University?
You know, it was a lifelong dream in a sense. I grew up in Calcutta. I was lucky I got into college in the US. I went to Yale undergrad, which is really, that's when I realized how different a higher ed system, the one in the US is. Because what was happening in India is we were following the British system, which was putting us in a straitjacket. Very narrow education, you didn't really have a broad worldview. And I got to college and it was so interdisciplinary. It was so much about developing a love for learning, right? And making you be able to think for yourself, write well, communicate well. Felt that was really what was missing in Indian higher ed. And that was one of the big reasons why we wanted to start Ashoka University.
Ashish, at 43, you decided to give up your full-time career as an investment manager. You were very successful. ChrysCapital was among the top private equity firms. Was it daunting? How did you think the decision through? Was there a plan B at all?
So firstly, I thought I had this idea in my head when I was quite young that I would have more than one career. So my grandfather, maternal grandfather, apart from being in business, he'd actually met Madame Montessori and he started a bunch of schools on the side, and so he had this love for education. I also read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography when I was young, and he had multiple careers. I was always impressed by Gandhiji and the fact that he was a lawyer, a barrister, and then went into public service afterwards. So I always thought that at age 30 I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was very clear I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. And that somewhere in my mid-40s, I wanted to switch into something that was more service-oriented. I wasn't 100% sure exactly what it was going to be when I was in my 20s, but I had this notion in my head of having a second career and doing it in my mid-40s. I was lucky, I did reasonably well. During my investing career, I had made enough money. And so in a way, I said it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I switch?
Mm-hmm. So there was no tug of war of sorts, the heart wanting to do it, the mind kind of trying to caution you. Was there a phase of that kind?
No, I would say not so much that. It was daunting more because I wasn't sure if I was going to be successful in my second career. I wasn't sure if, I was suited for something outside of investing. So anything new, when you're doing it later in life, you think about the risks as well. But when I did it, that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to have a plan B. Because if you think too much, if the first 6 months are not good, then you're like, oh, I'm getting out of here. So when I left ChrysCapital, I gave up I didn't have any more equity in the firm. I got off every corporate board. I decided to take the plunge full time and essentially cut off my corporate connections. Not cut off as in, they're all friends, but in terms of not wanting to even spend 1% of my time on it. I said, now I'm all in, 100%, I want to give it my best, want to make it work. And there's been no looking back since. And honestly, I tell people who are friends in the corporate world that even though it takes some learning, everything has a learning curve attached to it, I think 80% of the skills are transferable.
So what did your industry friends and peers tell you when you decided to make this move? Were they cautious? Did they encourage you?
No, I think people were very encouraging. I mean, my own colleagues initially didn't believe me because they said, you're not going to leave. And I finally said, I am leaving. But no, I think when I finally decided, I think people were a little intrigued. They were not discouraging, they were intrigued. And later, I think many people have come to me and said, look, you've made me think about whether I want to do something different. Maybe not at 43, but maybe it's 50s or early 60s, post-retirement. So I think it's been very positive, very encouraging in general.
But that's the thing, Ashish. Most people look at philanthropy as something you do after 55, after 60, and it's a lot about writing a check. But you've been hands-on. How has your experience been? You said the skills are transferable, but what's different?
So firstly, I didn't want to just cut checks. I feel like my philanthropic work or life's work is about building institutions. Even ChrysCapital, which I did in the investing world, I'm very proud of the fact that I've been gone, but the institution continues and will continue. They've just raised their 9th fund. They've been around for a long time and they don't need me. So I'm redundant in a sense. And I almost feel that should be the mantra for everything. At the end of the day, whatever I build, I should eventually be redundant. So what's different is it varies between Ashoka and the other foundations. I think with Ashoka, higher ed is its own beast. Firstly, it's not profit making, so people tend to be much more mission oriented in university. 2 is academics is at the core. You have to work with faculty. I love that because I have intellectual interests and I have a lot of respect for faculty. But I think a lot of people who come from the world of business don't understand that it is a different world. Academia works on its own rhythm. You can't press the same buttons. It's not just about money, which is much more so in the world of business. And so you need to adjust your own thinking a bit. And unlike business where you can start in a very scrappy manner and build something of quality later, in a university context, whatever you do, you have to do in a world-class manner from day one, even when you're very small. So that's a realization that dawned on us very early. And we said, we have to do it very differently from the way we would do it in business. And we have to learn to work with faculty. We have to respect faculty. We have to work with senior academics to figure out who are the best academics to recruit, etc. And we have to have a shared governance model. It's not going to work. This is not one family that's going to dominate. We have a collective philanthropy model, and there's a shared governance model with the academics. So that is very different from the corporate world, where it's much more hierarchical. It's much more the board and the CEO, that one structure. There are many more structures in a university. In a foundation or non-profit, like Central Square Foundation, which works in school education, I had to learn a number of new things. How do you work with government? Government at the end is they spend 7 lakh crore on education. They are the main actor. If you don't work with government, you can't have large-scale impact. And whatever you do is not sustainable. 2 is there's a lot of learning around what actually works in education. It's very complex. It's not easy to change the classroom transaction. And what's suited for the Indian context. Just copy-paste from Finland in India is not going to work. And so it took a lot of learning, a lot of humility. Working with non-profits again is very different. People in the non-profit world, they are motivated very differently from people in the corporate world. So you have to learn to respect them, to work with them, to partner with them. So those are all new skill sets that I had to develop over time. And I actually enjoyed it because part of my heart was already there.
Was it a lot like trying to boil the ocean? A complex problem you're trying to solve. So how do you break it down to solvable parts for tangible results?
You look at building a whole university, it can be a very daunting task because a university doesn't get built in 5 years.
Yes.
It's actually a 25, 30-year project before you can say it's stabilized and before you build something of quality. So we broke it up into chunks. Like, you see this campus here. Even when we started with just the first phase, that is these buildings and the dining here and one residence building, just 300,000 square feet. Today we have 1.5 million square feet and we have another 650,000 under construction. So when this is done, we'll be almost 7x what we were when we started with in 2014, right? But we chunked it up. We said we'll start very small. We initially started with a program that was off campus on a rented site, called the Young India Fellowship. It was a non-degree program, so it was like a pilot. We did that well, then we started with the undergrad program. We only started with humanities and social sciences initially. We didn't start all the disciplines. And then slowly, we grew in size. We then expanded into the sciences, computer science. We're truly interdisciplinary university. I think people often say liberal arts, where they think we're only doing humanities or social sciences. But I think what they don't realize is over the last 8-10 years that we built Ashoka, we cover almost all disciplines now, about 20 disciplines. What we just consciously have left out are the professional degrees. So engineering, medicine, law, because there are a number of institutions in India that focus on that. So we said what's missing is really this broad university, this interdisciplinary university that focuses on humanities, social science, fundamental science, computational data science. And that's what Ashoka is now, but it's a place of excellence in research and teaching, both. I mean, many institutions in India only prioritize one. I think we're already a great teaching university, and if you look at it, many of the students at top high schools, for them Ashoka is the number one pick. Often they will not go to the US, but say now there's an option in India finally, a place like Ashoka. We have students applying from 40 countries outside India, and on campus here we have students from about 25 different countries. So I think that part is already working. The research side takes longer. The science infrastructure takes longer. So in 10 years, I think we've come a long way, but I think it'll take us another 10, 15 years to build that real excellence in the sciences, the real excellence in research. We have a small PhD program, but to build a top-notch PhD program at scale, we're just starting a postdoc program. So there's a lot of ground to cover in the coming years.
Ashish, I'll touch on some of these points in a bit, but I find it very interesting the way you brought together 160 philanthropists to contribute to the cause and share your vision for good quality education in the country. Can you take us through what it really took to bring together so many talented people? How has that helped in the journey of Ashoka?
Yeah. So Ashoka always was a nation building project. We want the country to be in a much different place, in 25 years. And we feel India needs a few world-class universities. If you look at the top 200 universities in the world, every once in a while Indian Institute of Science will show up or one of the IITs, but we're not represented even in the top 150 or top 100. So we needed a new genre of institutions in India. And we said if this is really a nation building project, it's about building a different type of university which hopefully 100 flowers will bloom. It has to be one where we engage many other people. And if you look at the best universities in the world again, they are all non-profit because they are research universities. Two, none of them have a single family that dominates. John Harvard may have his name on the door of Harvard. The Tatas may have seeded Indian Institute of Science. But all of these today are, even if they're private, there are multiple stakeholders and they have a public spirit to them. So we thought that that was the right governance model. And so it makes sense to bring many people together. And then you have this collective energy working together to build the university versus one or two people trying to do it.
Is it still largely philanthropic capital in terms of
All
the expansion that you are looking at?
No, we will always be philanthropic. So there's no question. We still lose money every year. And I think we do so because we're investing in research. We invest in scholarships. So I think a lot of people again think Ashoka may be an elite place because our fee structure is higher again because we want to hire the best faculty from around the world. We want to offer beautiful experience to students. But what people don't realize is half the students here are on financial aid. Half the students. And so this coming year we'll give away about 90 crore in scholarships to students. So that's an investment we need to make. We need to invest in research, all of that kind of stuff. And then all the new buildings you see. I mean, we will spend a lot of money in the coming years. We have an FSI of about 5.5 million square feet. As I told you, we've only built 1.5 million, then another 650,000 coming up. So most of the university is yet to be built. So lots of resources will be required over the next 10 to 15 years.
What ails the education system in India, not just at the higher level, but starting from, say, K to 12, if you can take us through what are some problem areas that you are trying to solve via TCF?
I have this foundation that we set up called the Convergence Foundation. Via that, we incubate foundations that work on different areas. The first area we picked was school education, where we started work 11 years ago through Central Square Foundation. And now we have 10 other foundations, most of which are quite small, but they're sort of growing up as we speak. Central Square Foundation focuses on K through 12 education. India, as you know, has the largest school system in the world. So between class 1 and 12, there are 250 million plus students. I think we've made remarkable progress in a country in terms of providing universal access. So now every child goes to primary school, and even all the way up to senior secondary school, the dropout rates are much lower. In secondary school now we have about 80% enrollment in total, and at the college level, in higher education, about a 27% gross enrollment ratio. So I think India has done really well in terms of access. In fact, the gross enrollment ratio of girls or women is higher than that of men in college now. 1 percentage point higher. I think we should be really proud of that. In terms of quality, we do have islands of excellence, but at a mass level, I don't think we've been able to deliver quality. So I think those who are in the top 20-25% of the socio-economic spectrum, I think they get access to a good education. But as you come to the bottom half, who are in government schools, if you look at the learning levels, I think we have a lot of room for improvement. So, and learning starts to break down quite early. By class 3 itself, the ASA report shows that about 70% of children can't read second grade text. The World Bank has this marker called learning poverty, which says that at age 10 or class 5, 55% of children can't read third grade text. Right? Now, I think the government knows this, and I think they have started a program called Nipun Bharat, which the Prime Minister launched, which is focused on foundational literacy and numeracy. So we at Central Square Foundation are here to support the government, both at the center, in 12 states we have a presence, and we're very excited because now it's been pushed into mission mode, and for the next 5 years the resources are available, the political salience is there. We can see a real change start to happen at the ground. So this 5-year mission, I believe we'll now start to see, the way we've seen, there's been a big improvement in electrification or sanitation or now piped water, roads. I think education will really start to improve in the coming years.
Ashish, when we talk about India's growth story, we are very optimistic about the next 15-20 years, largely on ground of the demographic dividend. Can we keep pace with skilling as well as opportunities in education, equal opportunity for all? How do you think it's panning out in reality on ground?
No, I'm very bullish. Look, it's never a linear journey. There's always bumps in the road. We can't get overconfident. But I think we have not just the demographics. I think geopolitically we're very well positioned. And we have really good talent. Yes, half our kids may be left behind, but I think if you look at, most of our jobs will be basic jobs. So I think with minimal skilling, I think people can still be employed. But we also have amongst the most talented people in the world. I think this is evident from global CEOs being of Indian origin, and you see how well Indians in India have done as entrepreneurs, as corporate CEOs, etc. I think we have some of the best run companies in the world. So I think we are so well positioned because we've come out of a credit cycle. We are much better positioned there. Our companies have low levels of leverage. Our banks have cleaned up their balance sheet. This is not true around the world. We, as you said, have great demographics. This is not true around the world.
China has an aging population.
Even in the Western world. They've now turned in terms of demographics. So we have a young workforce, growing workforce. And I think, social norms have changed. Women now are more empowered than before. They're coming to the workforce. So I think all engines are going to fire in the coming years. And we have a proactive government, both at the center, but I see in every state now. I mean, you see the competitiveness between different states. Different chief ministers now want their states to develop. There are at least 6 states I've counted in India that have set $1 trillion GDP target. Now, for Maharashtra, it's still, they need to double to get there, and for the other states, they need to quadruple to get there. But I like that ambition. We didn't have that before. So I see that government also wants to facilitate business. And whatever planning we're doing in terms of industrial policy, it has a capitalist bent of mind, in that it's not that the state wants to come and substitute for private business. It wants to stimulate and support private enterprise. And that bodes well, I think, for the coming years.
So, when you look at other countries, how do you think India has performed when it just comes to the sheer progress we've made on the education front in terms of just skilling the youth, creating opportunities for employment?
I'll talk about what's gone well first, and I'll talk about what's lacking. I think what's gone well is we've managed to massify higher education. So if you look today, we have 41 million students in higher education. The only country that's larger is China, which has now almost 50 million students in higher education. But 41 million is a very, very large number, right? So, and you know, if you looked at our gross enrollment ratio 20 years ago, it was a fraction of where we are today. Right. So we've gone up 5 times in terms of the number of students in higher education. I think what we've been missing is more the stuff you do with your hands kind of stuff, skilling, right? Because we didn't in schools prioritize vocational education. Now I think there's a focus on that. We also didn't prioritize it in terms of having skills universities. I saw that the Chief Minister of Haryana and the Prime Minister launched this Vishwakarma University, which is about skilling here in Haryana itself, in Faridabad. And it's a great initiative, you know, in terms of focusing on skilling. Because we earlier looked down upon skilling. Skilling is one part, but I think two is also, India needs to focus more on creating more labor-intensive growth. So more job-intensive growth. And there we have a golden opportunity because China dominates all the labor-intensive manufactured exports. You know, whether it's garments, electronics, home interiors, sporting goods, toys. And now geopolitically, I think things are moving to India. India's cost structure is better, our infrastructure is better, ease of doing business is improved. So you can see with Foxconn, with all these announcements, Apple, I think that the next 10 years are crucial because we can suddenly create many more jobs than we have before, and many of those would be women-friendly jobs as well. So I think that's a real opportunity. We just need to make sure that we do that because we have this massive demographic dividend staring us in the face.
You often talk about the social sector and how entrepreneurial spirit can be used in that space as well. Yes. How have you seen this pan out during the past 10 years since you've been actively involved in the space?
I think that it's important that we build people's human capability. We need good health, good education. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's also very important. I'm a capitalist at heart in that I do believe that markets work. Capitalism by no means perfect. You need regulation. But I think India has a well-functioning market. Right?
Sure.
The bazaar really works well. We also have a supportive Samaj, in that there is a sort of community element developing now in India, and we have a proactive Sarkar. So I think those 3 elements are very much there. India's model really is, we'll give you the capabilities, markets will work, and it's for you to go and build your future thereafter. So the principle of equal opportunity, it's still not there. We do have long ways to go, but as best as possible, move towards equal opportunity through a good education, better health, markets working, while at the same time recognizing that you won't have equality in society. So the outcomes will never be equal because that depends on what you end up achieving with your life. Yeah, what you make of the opportunity. I'm a believer in that.
Mm-hmm. How do you think more youngsters can be enticed to enter the social enterprise space? As of now, we don't see too many young people involved in it or even look at it as a career, to be very honest. How do you think this can be changed?
I think firstly, we have to sell them the idea that these are the most complex problems and the most exciting problems to work on. Of course, business has some very exciting problems to work on as well. But imagine trying to work on improving India's school education. We have 250 million children. I mean, if one can really improve school education in the next 10, 15, 20 years, my God, what a contribution one has made to the planet. Even if you can do it in your district or in your block, such a massive contribution. Or if one can work on, climate change or energy transition, what a massive contribution, whether you do it through the for-profit sector or through the development sector. So I think India has lots of opportunity, but also lots of complex problems. And I think young people often get attracted to working on complex problems. Historically, the pay wasn't as good. I think it's getting better in the social sector.
There are a lot of startups in the space, as you said, looking at specific causes like climate change, agriculture. Tech is at the forefront of all of it. What do you feel of many of these startups? It's not a non-profit business, but they don't make profits. How do you look at that?
Look, I think the whole startup ecosystem has changed dramatically in the last decade, uh, largely for the positive, in that it's unleashed tremendous energy. I mean, look at how many bright young people are out there trying new things. They work 24/7, they're entrepreneurial. I mean, they do things like the way maybe we couldn't when we were in our 20s or early 30s. So I have a lot of respect for that. I also have a lot of respect that people are working on some very hard problems, whether it's space tech or biotech or,
Sure.
I mean, there's people doing that to agri-tech. I think people want to really work on hard problems. It's not just about putting up some website and selling some fancy stuff. I mean, these are hard because they interface with the real world. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to work on agri-tech, you've got to solve some problem for the farmer, or you've got to solve some problem in the value chain and increase productivity. That's the way you'll extract value for yourself. I think the only grouse I have is that there was probably too much capital available. It was too readily available. And so I don't blame it, but I think a lot of people also wasted a lot of money and frankly learned some bad habits. And now more discipline has come in, where people have to build the right business models before they scale too rapidly.
By and large, do you still think that valuations are a little stretched in this space?
I think they were. And look, in any sector, it always takes a long time for valuations to correct. I'm a little bit outside this space now, so I can't tell you with any degree of authority. But as from a distance, it feels like, yes, it was grossly overvalued, but and when things deflate, they don't happen just overnight, they happen over a period of time.
Mm-hmm. Ashish, you've been great at calling out some very important inflection points in the business cycle. Where do you think we are?
See, I look more than anything else at where the country overall is going.
Yes.
Because I think as an investor or even someone who's building a business, I think you have to think long term. And I think that India is poised to grow at 7-8% actually. I disagree with the Ruchi Sharma thesis that because the world is slowed down, so there's one school of thought, world is slowed down, global trade has become problematic, supply chains have fragmented, therefore it'll be hard for countries to grow more than 4-5%. I disagree with that fundamentally because we are still very low per capita income, we're still sub $3,000. Productivity has a long ways to go. We can still improve productivity at 4-5 percentage points a year. We still have our labor force growing at 1.5-2 percentage points per year, and we still have so much more in female labor force participation so low. So I still think we've got a lot of legs as far as growth is concerned, in the coming years. So as a long-term business builder, entrepreneur, I think the best is yet to come.
The kind of rate hikes we've seen in the US, the pace, it's something we've not seen in recent history, and many money managers have no first-hand experience of navigating this. What do you make of it?
No, I think it's, again, things were almost unreal for too long. I mean, who would have ever thought of a zero interest rate world? I'm a student of economics. It was just almost paradoxical. It was like La La Land
Yes.
for a long time. So I think we're just going back to a more normal world. Now, I think the Western world has its own set of difficulties where they're very indebted. If you look at most of these countries, debt to GDP is 300+%. If you add up household debt, corporate debt, and the government debt, all three put together, and if they have very high interest rates for a long period of time, they can't sustain it. So I think in the Western world, whilst interest rates have gone up, they will try to repress rates over time. The problem they have is that they've managed to borrow very easily because the dollar has been the global currency, and Asia, which is the big saver, Japan, China, etc., or the Middle East, have been more than willing to send their savings westward. I think that tide is going to turn. The center of gravity of the world is shifting to Asia, and so I think now there will be stagnation in the Western world for a long, long period of time, both economically, in markets as well. And I think this is what I call the rise of the rest. I know it feels almost silly to be saying it when Pakistan is going through a crazy crisis and Sri Lanka was bombed out and Bangladesh is doing better but also, you know, on the verge, and there's so many other basket cases in Africa. And if you look over the course of history, Angus Maddison has this beautiful book where he studies as an economist the history of economic history of the world, and you see from 0 AD to almost 1800 AD or 1750 AD, per capita income was not that different across the world because all societies were agrarian. It's only after the Industrial Revolution that the West took off, right? And the rest got left behind. Now the rest is catching up, and so I think this is the era over the next 50 years of convergence, and India being the most populous country in the world now is at the center of that convergence.
Are you seeing this translate when it comes to aspirations of the young? At least the more people I speak to, there's still a desire to move to the richer part of the world and work over there after studying. Do you see that changing in the next 15 years?
Of course. You know, again, it's a natural thing. I think nobody goes, even if you look at tourists, they tend to go from poorer countries to richer countries. I mean, most Indians don't wake up saying, I want to go to, you know, Sierra Leone for my next vacation, you know, or Nigeria for my next vacation. They want to go to America, they want to go to Europe, or maybe Thailand or Singapore, wherever. Same thing with students. You know, remember the best universities, the West has been more advanced for a long period of time. So I think often the best universities are in the richest countries. And the reason the US has the best is because they were the economic superpower. The reason the Chinese are catching up, they're the new economic superpower. And so India will also catch up as our economic weight in the world goes up. So for the moment, yes, it's attractive for many students to want to go abroad, partly because they believe that maybe the best universities are there. Partly, most Indian students are going with a ticket to a job in the US, right? Particularly those going at the master's level. I think that will change. The US is anyway making it harder with the H-1B visa. I think people will turn around and say it's more exciting to be in India over time.
Ashish, thank you so much for speaking with us and sharing the milestones of your journey, and wish you all the best for all the exciting new projects that you've lined up.
Thank you. It's a pleasure speaking with you.